in terms of understanding what we're doing with this thing we're doing, this being alive and having an interaction with the world or the universe. So I'm saying if you just keep this slate clean, just forget about all the fables and the dragons and the nonsense, and you look with our science at the universe, you see it's just these chemicals. And then we can surmise on planet Earth what happened is one of those chemicals, evolution begins, in a sense. A type of, I would argue, that the first chemistry created a replication by force. But I don't think there's anything significant in terms of relevance to our lives beyond understanding that's just a mechanical process that once initiated, the mechanisms that consume the most matter and possess them, whoever does it first and fastest wins in the early evolution. But all essentially slaves to, the reproductive cells. So those are the only cells that matter, and the rest of this is just a mechanism for replicating successfully. And organisms obviously had to have some built-in mechanism so that when times were good, they didn't go too far and become too successful and all of that kind of thing and end up wallowing in their own waste. Is that over time it's learned that being too successful will get you killed. And so many of the most successful organisms ended up dying because they ended up overpopulating and essentially becoming poisonous to each other. Their evolution would fail to produce an organism that could survive in the bleak world they created. It would be essentially like us living in our own shit. We're not likely to thrive in such an environment. Living in waste is not going to be conducive to your survival. In the end, you get this complex brain, and once you have a brain, it's basically a very functional device. Intelligence was just used for this organism to scheme its success in the environment. But the original purpose was a scheming tool. But clearly, as we gain more and more knowledge, we're able to elevate perception. I can see myself as just a player in the game. Stuff like nepotism can be understood as not being logical perceptions of the world, that those feelings and emotions aren't intended to give us the truth. They're intended to give us information valuable to perpetuating our selfish gene, not our knowledge, in the sense that those are things we sense or feel for the primitive purpose. That's the crude agenda. So those things are anti-intelligent. In gaining a third-person perspective and a bird's-eye view of yourself, you can understand all kinds of the mechanisms of your psychology, understand your nepotism, the cheats that exist, the ill logic of some of your behavior, and you can understand that there's a bigger game being played among equals rather than a game that's just about me. I'm more obsessed with understanding a total game and how the game itself is played. And that's all part of what I would call is the evolution of intelligence or knowledge. So you have these three fundamental phases of evolution. The cell's evolution, the evolution of the colony organism, and then ultimately the evolution of memes or ideas or knowledge base. What would the smartest thing you could possibly create in the universe, the most knowledgeable, non-biased, non-personally biased, non-personally motivated thinking device come up with as a solution to the problem of what is the truth? You're motivated personally, selfishly. That's how you're constructed, as a selfish organism set loose in the world. And you have this scheming tool of a brain that enables you to do logic, to understand that this is how you go around a tree so you don't walk into the tree. It's a very useful functional device. The catch is that we can turn that device, that instrument, that smartness to questions nature didn't really design us to ponder, like the purpose or function of our existence. We can look at other things besides trees and how to swat a fly, and we can ponder other questions, other dilemmas, and use this logic device that can work fairly well at doing logic. Who cares if you can see the texture of the bark on the tree? If you can't get the reality of the sentient creatures living in it. There's nothing about our nature that's particularly, like I said, intelligent. It was like a sword. It was a weapon we used against the world. And we can turn it into something better than that by just changing the focus. This whole endeavor is to describe reality. I mean, the first thing we have to do is justify the game. That it's there's no alternative reasonable theory that could ever justify incarcerating a sentient, suffering-capable organism in horrible conditions for the minor indulgence of the enjoyment of a cupcake. There's no reasonable theory that could be constructed to make that make sense. It's not likely that anything good is going to happen to the world or to a sentient life on Earth if I go around pushing old ladies. These are just logical statements that just can't be rationally defeated as logical statements. So it's got to be deeper than intent. You have to have reason behind behavior. You have to be able to account for it with some sort of, here's the probabilistic equation. The conversation really just has to be around this idea of, does some notion in somebody's head of value, like victory, does that really mean anything beyond you don't feel miserable? Does it have any power to give you authority to say for your wonderful feeling you will risk imposing a not wonderful feeling on somebody else? Logically, it can be stated that yes, a wonderful feeling isn't worth anything if it comes at a cost where you have to violate somebody else's peace. So I just don't see any point in talking about personal autonomy, personal victory, personal I did okay. It's just so irrelevant in a game where your existence comes at something else's expense. If your survival is being maintained by a biosphere that goes through torture every day, and if you're not mindful, or if you haven't accounted for that price, you haven't played the game fair. You haven't acknowledged the reality of your existence. Show me something you're doing here vital enough to justify the price the biosphere pays for human existence. And by you, I'm saying humanity in general. How can we justify the price for little silly conversations we have with each other while sentient creatures are tortured to give us the oxygen, pretend we're doing something meaningful, when all we're really doing is being compelled by a motivating desire mechanism created by crude, idiotic forces that have no conception of truth. It's a simple game. Get hungry, get horny, chase, get, die. I mean, there's just nothing else happening here, and just concede, just admit the simple truth that you are driven by your addictions, by deprivations inside of you. The deprivation is not in the circumstance, it is not in the universe. There is no plea or need to perpetuate the need mechanism. There's no need to keep creating need. How simple can it be put? There's no need. There's no rationally definable need to keep creating unneeded need. Designed to be gladiating machines where we get off on trivial and meaningless victories over our fellow humans. We feel good about ourselves often for the most disgusting and base reasons. I mean, you can see it in your psychology. Do not pretend to me that you do not do this, that you do not have these wheels turning. We like things for really rotten reasons, and we even love things for stupid reasons, trivial, superficial, crass reasons. The stuff that has hooked you for reasons that if you analyze them, you can see they are not meaningful reasons. They are trivial, superficial, crude, and even in some ways quite ugly. You'll like something because you like the violence. That's a good word right there, the violence of it. The game that's broken, and that's the subject, is the game, and people keep wanting to make it personal. What is the function of life, and the fact that it doesn't really have a function, that we're redundantly playing out a silly chase game with these biological organisms, and they are unintelligent design. That is the rule. Unintelligent design, playing a horrific, high-stakes game with no rational, sensible rules of fairness or justice or deserve or any of that. Nothing, no accountability to what is right and wrong, what is suitable. And that's how we exist here. We exist in this biosphere because all these little sentient creatures are existing in this little torture chamber where every day they go through all kinds of horror. Mites eat their eyeballs, and all kinds of crap happens to them, and they don't get any morphine, and they don't get any release. They just suffer and then die. And it's on us. It's the blood we make our stupid little cupcakes out of, and have our little silly parties, and clap and go yay yay, happy happy. And it's just, it's bullshit, it's a lie, it's unfair, it's mean, it's nasty. These are truths here. This is what the game is. There's no other description of the game.